Uh, why did you feel initially that vocation, the draw to be a teacher, to be a professor? And then what did you discover once you were inside of the academy that made you want to get out and eventually come to work for an organization like ISI?
Yeah, I got into academia because I love to read and I love to write, and higher education is an incredibly important part of American culture. And I thought that I would be a research professor and write these, highfalutin articles forever. And it turns out people often ask me, our fellow conservatives, they say, are things as bad as I hear they are in higher ed? And I always say it's so much worse. It's so much worse because you tend to hear about the explicit things. So-and-so speaker got canceled. This person got deplatformed. But the much more troubling aspect of what's going on in higher ed are the quiet things, the chilling effect, the students and faculty afraid to say what they believe. I was at one of our events, Johnny, in St. Louis a few nights ago, and I told some friends of ISI that the moment that I knew things had gotten really bad came at the very end of my time in academia, but even at the very beginning. I remember assigning a chapter of Hemingway to some students in my very first semester because we were talking about how to write in a way that mimics how speech actually works. And I had a female student come up to me after class and say that she wanted to file a complaint because I had done violence to the students. And I said, I'm so sorry to hear that. What happened? And she said, well, Hemingway was a misogynist. And I said, yeah, he surely was. And she said, well, by exposing us to that, you've done violence to us. You've made us feel unsafe. And I, was very apologetic. And I said, oh, he was a monster in his personal life, but so was Picasso. But that doesn't mean that these aren't incredibly important cultural figures whose work we need to discuss. And I remember, this is the crucial part. I remember coming home to my wife and laughing and saying, boy, are these kids in for a rude awakening when they hit the real world. And I would never have expected a decade later that the real world would comport to that view, that the world of trigger warnings and safe spaces and speak your truth would come to dominate American culture and higher ed at large. And then at the end of my time in academia, it was just the levels of groupthink were Stalin-esque in the extreme. We hear a lot, as we know, about diversity and equity and inclusion on higher education, in higher ed and on campuses, but there is no intellectual diversity to speak of in a meaningful way. You can get 10 people in a room on faculty and in a classroom representing 10 different ethnicities, races, nationalities, and they're all going to believe the same thing. So it ends up this terribly homogenized world at most campuses. And that's why the work of ISI and our peer institutions is so essential, because we are stressing that there is a full spectrum of ideas in the American founding and throughout American history and through the tradition of Western Civ. And those ideas deserve to be shared with students and openly debated, and free exchange of ideas is what makes this country significant on the world stage. So I knew that I had hit a point when I was the outlier in too many situations, and there were too many situations sort of peers, faculty peers, knocking on the office door and saying, I can't help but notice you don't have a Black Lives Matter sign on your door. Sort of a Workers of the World Unite, nice shop you have here. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. So that was the end of it for me.
McKay, just a quick follow-up on that. One, would you mind sharing, what type of school you were teaching at? And I've sometimes heard it said that, it's the Ivy Leagues and the big kind of top state schools where there's real problems. And, if you go to one of these smaller regional colleges, you're generally okay. Is that true in your experience?
No, I have not found that to be the case. There's a very fascinating split. I taught at three colleges: a small Catholic college founded for immigrants, where the students were too focused on finding a living wage to be concerned with wokeness. And then at Berry College in Georgia, where I was very fortunate to work with Peter Lawler, a friend of ISI, who is dearly missed. And then most of my teaching was at the University of Kansas, so a flagship state school. And the fascinating split there is I taught two groups of students. I taught in our honors program, which is sort of the best of the best of students at KU. A lot of these kids were people who maybe got accepted to Ivies, but their families couldn't afford it, and they got this full ride at a state school, so they came there. And then I taught, for lack of a better word, the regular students, the non-honor students. And almost to a T, the non-honors students were hardworking, and they came from more working class backgrounds. They were very open-minded. They were interested in learning. They did not care that much about identity politics. The honors program students, the children of physicians, attorneys, what we think of as the cognitive elite in the United States, they were the ones who had grown up wealthier and were utterly consumed by identity politics and wokeness on campus. So it's this very fascinating split where you would see the children of the elite coming to a campus and the ones, reminding each other to, well, you need to check your privilege when you say that. Whereas the regular students were much more concerned with, I'm here to learn, I am open-minded, I want to get my degree and improve my life. So no, I did not find any campus that was totally devoid of this stuff. It is bad everywhere.
I just know, before we turn to Richard Weaver, just one point I would say is, as a student, I found that to be the case. And I went to Boston College, which I guess would fall into the more elite level universities, but the same sort of thing of a lot of racial and ethnic diversity, but there's absolutely no diversity of opinion. And I know, as an ISI student, ISI honors scholar, and now someone on staff, I've learned more in the last year debating with my colleagues in a spirit of open inquiry and sort of trying to get to truth than I did at a place where they said there is no truth to be found, or there's facts and then there's your values. And so whatever your values are, sort of whatever delusions you'd like to believe, that will still let you believe.